What is up, disc golfers? Today on Iceberg TV, I want to have a quick discussion about these new molds from the Innova factory store. These are the sort of revived Discmania molds that Innova used to make for Discmania, and now they're just going ahead and making them themselves. So it's going to be really confusing for people watching coverage when Calvin Heiberg walks up to the tee and throws a mid-disc 3, and then Eagle McMahon steps up to the tee and throws an MD3. They're essentially the same disc. They have most of the same dimensions, a slight difference here and there, but ultimately these are basically two of the same disc that basically are going to fly the same, and it's a really good mold, especially the MD3 and the FD. Innova players are probably going to throw the FD, and Discmania players are probably going to throw the FD. Same goes for the MD3. Both players from both manufacturers are going to throw this mold because it's a really good mold. So people watching the coverage are going to see Calvin Heiberg possibly throw an FD or a mid-disc 3, and then Eagle may walk up to the tee and do the exact same thing. And when, let's say we have Nate Sexton, Paul Ulibarri, Big Germ announcing on Jomez, they're going to have to find a way to explain this in a way that makes sense to people who don't know what's going on. And I'm really curious to hear how they do that in a simple, quick way without offending either party, because it's crucial that they get this right. Because if Calvin Heiberg walks up to the tee and throws a mid-disc 3, and Nate Sexton happens to say Calvin Heiberg with his MD3, that's going to help Discmania sell more MD3s, because people are going to think it's a Discmania MD3, but it's not. It's a different disc. It's a mid-disc 3. Innova doesn't benefit at all when people buy MD3, and Discmania doesn't benefit at all when people buy mid-disc 3. So I think this is going to be really confusing for a lot of people, and I think it's going to be really interesting to hear how the top commentators in our sport actually explain this in a good way to hundreds of thousands of fans that happen to be watching the coverage on that given day. This is going to be really interesting because I've heard, especially on the Disc Golf Pro Tour, they were saying Haley King was throwing a zone a whole bunch, but she's literally sponsored by Innova, and I think that was a huge issue that nobody really talked about. But that's free advertising for Discraft, and it's not going to help Innova sell any discs when everyone thinks that Haley's throwing a zone, even though she's not even sponsored by Discraft anymore. So when these types of things happen, it can cause issues. It hasn't really caused an issue yet, but I think in this specific situation, it's going to be more likely to happen more than ever, because it is a bit more confusing, especially to the people who don't know what's going on. So I'd really love to hear your comments in the comment section down below, because I think I also think it's a fun dynamic, because we're developing a rivalry. And I think eventually, as this continues to simmer and Discmania continues to release more molds and Innova keeps releasing the same molds, the players may start to have more rivalries. The two companies and brands are going to have a rivalry, obviously. So with all this being said, leave your comments in the comment section down below. Which will you be throwing? Will you be throwing the harder to get Discmania versions because they're not producing that many and people are buying them up and reselling and they're super hard to get? Right now, it's just a little bit easier to get the Innova versions of these discs, and it's a heck of a lot easier to get backups for retail price as opposed to paying the reseller price for the Discmania discs. So I think Discmania's got a lot of work to do as far as producing enough discs so everybody can get the disc they want as well as the backups. But again, these are just my concerns that I'm putting out there because I want to hear your guys' opinion as to where you stand on this issue. You're watching Iceberg TV, and take care.